Before the 1940s, something as simple as a scraped knee or, a sore throat could be incredibly dangerous.
A potential death sentence, really.
Yeah.
If an infection took hold, doctors were almost powerless.
Today, we're looking at the story of the man, the mold, and the team that completely changed all of that. They found the first true wonder drug.
And it is a story that you just couldn't make up. It's all about failure, incredible observation, and a massive amount of luck.
Okay, so let's start with the main character here, Alexander Fleming. He's born in 1881 on a farm in Scotland.
And that's important. Growing up in nature like that, you learn to look at things, to notice the small details.
A skill that turned out to be, well, the most important one he had. He eventually moves to London, gets a boring job in a shipping office, but then an inheritance lets him study medicine.
At St. Mary's Hospital. And that's the decision that really starts this whole global revolution in medicine.
A revolution that was, as you said, forged in the fires of World War I.
Oh, absolutely. Fleming joined the Royal Army Medical Corps and was sent to these battlefield hospitals in France. I mean, you have to imagine the scene.
Just soldiers pouring in with these horrific deep wounds.
Exactly. And the wounds were contaminated with dirt, with bacteria.
Yeah.
What he saw there just completely shocked him.
They were dying in huge numbers from infection.
Mm.
Right. Things like gangrene, even if the wound itself wasn't fatal.
Right. So what could the doctors do? What was the treatment? They relied on these strong antiseptics.
Antiseptics, so like really harsh chemicals.
Think of them as industrial strength cleaners.
Mm-hmm.
The idea was simple. Pour them into the wound and, kill everything.
So why didn't that work? I mean, stronger chemicals should mean better killing, shouldn't it?
You'd think so. But that's where Fleming's observational skill really kicked in. He realized that the chemicals were only getting the surface of these deep wounds.
Yeah.
And, more importantly, they were doing something terrible to the body itself. They were destroying the body's own first line of defense.
The protective white blood cells.
Exactly. You're killing the soldiers on your own side. The antiseptic was just so much better at killing the white blood cells than it was at reaching the bacteria deep in the tissue.
So the big lesson from the war was you can't poison the patient to cure the infection.
That's it. That experience gave him a mission for the rest of his life. Find something that kills bacteria safely without harming the patient's own cells.
So he comes back to London to his small lab at St. Mary's, and it's famously a bit cluttered.
He was brilliant, but maybe not the tidiest person. He'd leave his culture plates, the little dishes for growing bacteria, just sitting around on benches.
And that untidiness actually leads to his first big discovery, even before penicillin.
Right. This is in 1922. We can call it a near miss. He found something called lysozyme.
How did he find it?
Well, he had a cold. And, being a scientist, he decided to examine his own nasal mucus under a microscope.
A little gross, but dedicated.
And he saw that his mucus was literally dissolving certain bacteria right on the plate. He'd found a natural infection fighter that the human body makes.
He later found it in other places too, right?
Yeah, in tears, skin, even in egg whites. It was definitive proof that the body produces its own defensive stuff.
So he found a natural antibiotic, non-toxic. Why wasn't that the answer?
The catch. The problem was that lysozyme only worked against harmless bacteria. It couldn't do a thing against the deadly ones, the germs that caused all those terrible diseases.
But it showed him what was possible. He knew what he was looking for now.
Exactly. He needed something natural, something potent, and something non-toxic to human cells.
Which brings us to 1928 and probably the most famous accident in the history of medicine.
The scene is late summer 1928.
Mm-hmm.
Fleming had been studying this common bacteria, Staphylococcus. He leaves a bunch of his culture plates on a desk and goes on vacation.
And when he gets back in September, he starts cleaning up the old, messy plates.
Yep. And he's about to throw this one last plate away, but he stops. He looks closer.
That observational skill again?
Right. One of the plates was contaminated with a blue-green mold that must have just floated in through a window. But instead of just tossing it, he noticed something really weird.
What was it?
Around the spot where the mold was growing, all the bacteria had been completely killed off. There was this clear circle around the mold. He said he found it quite funny and interesting.
Most people would see a spoiled experiment. Fleming saw a quarantine zone.
That's a perfect way to put it. So he grows more of this mold, identifies it as being from the Penicillium family, and he names the active substance.
Penicillin.
Penicillin. And his first tests were just, explosive. The mold juice, as he called it, killed all sorts of harmful germs, the ones that cause scarlet fever, pneumonia, meningitis.
And crucially,
Crucially, and this must have taken him right back to those WWI hospitals. It was completely non-toxic.
right,
It didn't harm white blood cells at all.
he had found it, the magic bullet he'd been looking for since the war, so why didn't it immediately start saving lives?
This is the really frustrating part of the story. It comes down to biology versus chemistry. Fleming was a bacteriologist. He studied germs.
But he wasn't a chemist.
Exactly. And turning his mold juice into a stable, usable medicine, that required some pretty advanced chemistry.
What does unstable mean here? Like, what was the actual problem?
So think of it like this. The mold is growing in a liquid, a broth, and it's releasing the penicillin into that liquid. But the second Fleming tried to extract just the active ingredient to make it a powder or something a doctor could use.
It just fell apart.
It was like trying to bottle smoke. The chemical was so fragile it just lost all its power the moment he tried to purify it.
So the discovery was basically too delicate for the technology they had at the time.
Exactly. He couldn't grow it in huge amounts, and he couldn't stabilize it. He published his findings in 1929, but since he couldn't give doctors a pill or a reliable injection, the world just kind of ignored it.
Yeah.
For almost 10 years.
It's incredible to think of all the people who died in that decade because the right chemistry team hadn't seen his paper yet.
It took another world war to make it urgent. And that's where the team from Oxford University comes in.
Okay, so who are the people who finally picked this project back up?
It was a team led by Howard Florey, a pathologist, and a man named Ernst Chain, who was the brilliant chemist that Fleming never had.
And with World War II starting, the need for a drug like this was suddenly not just academic.
It was a military necessity. They knew infections would be a huge problem. So they pulled Fleming's old paper and got to work with this relentless dedication.
What did they do differently?
They worked day and night. I mean, to grow the mold, they used anything they could find. Old bathtubs, food tins, bedpans. It was a completely makeshift operation.
But they had the chemistry expertise.
Yes. Chain finally figured out how to use new techniques to isolate the active ingredient and keep it stable to turn it into a pure powder.
And that led to the big test, right? The experiment with the mice in 1940.
A decisive one. It was incredibly simple. They injected 8 mice with a lethal dose of bacteria. They gave 4 of those mice their tiny, precious supply of penicillin.
And the other 4 got nothing.
Right. The 4 untreated mice were dead within hours. The 4 that got penicillin, they all survived.
Wow! That's undeniable proof.
It was the moment, the proof that it worked inside a living creature. So they immediately moved to a human trial.
This was the policeman, Albert Alexander.
That's right. He had a terrible infection from just a small scratch. He was already near death. They gave him the penicillin, and it was a miracle. His fever dropped. The infection started clearing.
But I remember reading that he still didn't make it.
He didn't. And this is the tragic part that highlights the final problem: supply. They were still making it on such a tiny scale that they just ran out of the drug before he was fully cured.
So the infection came back.
It came back, and he died. But the experiment proved its incredible potential. They knew the next step wasn't about the lab. It was about industry. They needed a factory.
And with Britain being bombed, they couldn't build one there, so they turned to the United States.
Right. Florey went to the U.S. and started working with American companies. And they made 2 massive breakthroughs.
What were they?
First, they found that a cheap waste product from processing corn, something called corn steep liquor, was like a super fertilizer for the mold. It made it grow much, much faster.
Okay, so they found the perfect food source. What was the second discovery?
The second was pure luck again. A scientist on the team found a much stronger strain of the mold growing on a moldy cantaloupe she found at a local market.
A cantaloupe? Seriously?
A moldy cantaloupe from Peoria, Illinois. This new strain produced way more penicillin than Fleming's original one, and those 2 things together, the corn liquor and the new mold-unlocked mass production.
So the operation went from bathtubs in Oxford to these giant fermentation tanks in America.
The scale just exploded. By the time of the D-Day landings in Normandy in 1944, there was enough penicillin to treat every single wounded Allied soldier. It saved countless lives.
An incredible journey. And of course, in 1945, Fleming, Florey, and Chain all shared the Nobel Prize.
As they should have. But Fleming, he always stayed humble. He often said something like, "Nature made penicillin, I just found it."
And that discovery didn't just save lives in the war, it launched the entire age of antibiotics. It totally changed the game for medicine.
For the first time, doctors had a reliable weapon against bacteria. It was a fundamental shift.
But the final chapter of the story is one that we are living through right now, and it's a bit of a warning.
It is. Fleming himself warned about it. The challenge today is bacterial resistance.
Meaning the germs are fighting back.
Exactly. Because we've used antibiotics so much, sometimes when we shouldn't have, the bacteria are evolving to survive them. It's this constant arms race, and some infections are becoming very hard to treat again.
It's like we're slowly heading back towards that pre-penicillin world.
In some ways, yes.
Yeah.
Which is why understanding this history is so important. You see how this incredible discovery was almost lost multiple times.
From a messy petri dish to a lucky cantaloupe, the story reminds you that breakthroughs aren't always planned. They often depend on someone being curious enough to look at a mistake and a team being dedicated enough to see it through.
And that history gives us a mission. We have to appreciate how vital these medicines are and use them carefully so they're still around for the future.
This story shows us that sometimes the greatest discoveries are hiding in the mess you almost threw away. Good luck with your studies.
See you next time.